All right, let's get started on the next lecture. She side, Lilia side. Make sure I'm on. All right, we're moving to the next chapter, chapter 14 in the book. The book calls it the time factor. Another heading is the time value of money. I call it interest rates and present value as the main things that we learn in the chapter. Interest rates are at the same time simple and confusing. There's a few different formulas involving exponents and factorials and a little bit more math than we're doing in the rest of the class, but most of what we want to do is we can learn a couple formulas. We want to think about how this is going to apply to how we think about economic decision-making, policy decision-making, and how we think about environmental economics, needing to make decisions between different activities, different investments, different regulations. So discounting is the big thing we'll talk about, how to discount the future correctly to the present. There's a lot of different ways to think about and motivate interest rates. As the chapter's called, it's the value of money in time. The interest rate tells us how to translate different amounts of money into between different time periods. A lot of times we'll motivate the interest rate by saying it's our impatience. We want more money now and less money in the future. It's worth it to us to have our consumption in the current period. It's worth less to us to get paid later. So it's a measure of our impatience to have money now. Money that we have now, we can say in a few different ways is worth more than in the future. We also could say that if we have the money now, we can invest it and earn more money later. So we'd rather have the money now so we can earn more, invest more for later. But also in terms of consumption, we're relatively impatient and we'd rather have our consumption now. Consumption later on, we're not as concerned about as consumption right now. Interest rates are the fundamental linkage that's going on between somebody saving money or investing it and somebody borrowing money or taking money out to make a productive use. If I go to the bank, at the same time my paycheck is going in there, I'm saving it. At the same time, I'm borrowing money from the bank and my mortgage to pay for my house. And those are linked by an interest rate. The bank doesn't pay me any money to save it, but they charge me a lot of money to borrow it. There's a lot about interest rates that we don't cover in the class. So interest rates are one of the main things. We could have many classes on interest rates, really. It's one of the main things that happens in macroeconomics, and this class doesn't really cover macroeconomics. We just cover micro and applied micro and policy. We don't cover, big trends in the economy. It's one of the main instruments of government policy. It's one of the main things that the government can do to steer the economy. They actually talk about it on the news regularly, almost every day. What are we doing with interest rates? What's the government issuing more money, printing more money? It's also the outcome of a whole bunch of financial markets. Trillions of dollars are getting traded between different markets, people betting, making different bets on the future, making different investments on the future. They're all affecting this interest rate. So we have three people on the bottom. Anybody know the name of the woman in the middle? What's that? Janet Yellen. She's the chairperson, the chair of the Federal Reserve. Why do we care about Janet Yellen? What does she do when she's not the chair of the Federal Reserve? What's that? She's a professor at UC Berkeley. Right? So this is like a feather in our cap at UC Berkeley. We study economics at UC Berkeley, and an economics professor from UC Berkeley gets appointed to be the head of the Federal Reserve. Seems like a good thing, right? Who are the other people? So we got Barack Obama. Anybody the other guy on the right? Ben Bernanke, the outgoing head of the Federal Reserve, who retired after steering us through the last recession, appoints Janet Yellen. So anything this woman says is news, right? Like she goes bowling and it's news, right? And the way that she constructs her statements are so carefully worded. Like every phrase in a sentence is carefully parsed because somebody's going to analyze it. Because she drives the interest rate of the United States, which drives the interest rate of the world, which trillions of dollars are getting traded in microseconds on, right? So we have a weird situation with a cult of personality with this unelected person who has a whole crazy amount of power. But her job is to barely steer the boat at any given time. When she was appointed, there was some debate about her, and there still is debate about her from the left and the right. You would say that Janet Yellen is a dove. A dove means somebody who's more concerned about lowering employment than lowering inflation. So I'm not going to get into macroeconomics, but this is just a little point about it. It's called the Phillips curve if you take macro, or 1A. There's a trade-off between, at the federal level, at the national economy level, between lowering inflation and lowering unemployment. So you have low inflation when you have high employment, and then when unemployment gets lower and lower, wages start to go up, and up here you would have low unemployment and high inflation. If you look at these dots, it's not a very good fit. Like, it's not very compelling that there's a line through these dots. But this is sort of like an econ 1, macro 1 kind of thing. If you think about all these points over here, 8%, 10% unemployment, like let's just say that this year is like a recession, right? This year is bad. And then when the economy's sort of chugging along, we're in this cloud of dots over here. And there's this person at the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve's meeting with all the governors from the regional Federal Reserve, and they're trying to figure out what the interest rate should be, what the right inflation rate should be. So generally they say, let's have inflation be less or around 2%, and let's try to get unemployment to around 4%. Today we are at 6% and 1.5%. So right now we're something like this, sort of in the middle, right? And so this is like debates if you hear the news about the economy, and Janet Yellen says, or people like Janet Yellen says, the Fed should still be keeping interest rates low so we can move this way. Let's get more people back to work. 6% isn't good enough. There's still lots of people unemployed. And people who are just concerned about financial markets and the wealthier side of people don't want inflation, and so they're like, okay, let's start, let's stop printing so much money, and let's make sure that we don't get up to this area here where inflation starts to hike up again. It's a very imprecise science. There's a lot going on. This curve doesn't really hold anymore, but that's just a basic way to think about it and where we are. So why do we care about interest rates in environmental economics? So to begin with, we're looking at planning projects over time. We're not just doing costs and benefits and economic values in one time period. We're looking into the future. There's regulation that's going to go into effect in the future. We're public works projects. We're going to build a park. We're going to conserve some land, and that's going to have benefits into the future. As we'll see in the next couple chapters, and not the next lecture, but after that, we will have entire models on resources, the renewable and non-renewable resources models, because they have multiple time periods, have the interest rate as sort of the key aspect of that model. How many fish to cut, when to cut our trees down, how often to replant our trees, that's all going to be driven with interest rate, basically. Fundamental parts of the models. In the big picture, what are we going to do about the future? A lower carbon future, and I'll already be talking about this today. Investing in clean tech, investing in green tech, investing in low carbon technologies. All of these investments in the future and their higher capital cost are going to have interest rates as a big part of it. The example that we'll go through in the class, that's the example in the textbook here, is this question of energy conservation. So people could pay more to insulate their home. It will generate a stream of benefits over the life of the home. People don't do it enough. People, like the government gets involved in encouraging people to insulate their home. It's a very low-cost way to have a lower carbon future, and it should pay for itself, as we'll see, but people don't do it often enough. So there's a whole bunch of terms in today's lecture. You can go through, there's term sheets in the end of the chapter, but I'll just talk through them. Here's just as a spelling issue. It's principal, not principal. You stick to your principles, but you invest your principal. So a principal is the initial deposit into a savings account. So we're going to start, our principal is going to be the amount that we save. That starting nugget. Also, in a mortgage or a loan, the principal is the amount that you borrowed. If I borrowed $500,000 to buy my home, I end up paying back $1 million, of which $500,000 is the principal. So it's the actual amount that starts off. An investment, so it's a term we all use, but to think about it in terms of the Econ 1 way, is using money to earn more money in the future. And it doesn't have to be specifically money, so we'll go through thinking about making other types of returns, basically, in terms, in not just making financial returns. So if in a winterizing your home example or insulating your home example, you're going to purchase things for your home. They're going to give you payouts in terms of reduced bills in the future. If you're a business, you're going to buy some machinery that can give you a payout in terms of your cost structure in the future. And a lot of what we look at in environmental economics, the problem sets this question about public goods. So we're going to buy something like a park or recreation, something of an economic value, now in terms of like there's a dollar amount to buy this recreation area, but it's going to pay a stream of recreation benefits in the future. Every year, so many people will visit it to go hiking. So it's not necessarily a monetary thing in the future. There'll be some stream of benefits that we're going to put a dollar value on. So interest, as we already started to motivate, is this value of shifting time between periods. It's multiple possible things, however. Interest rate could be the costs to somebody borrowing money, right? It's the cost that business has to pay to get money. It's the benefit to the person lending the money. It's the amount that it's going to be worth it to them to give up consumption now to get a higher return later. So, and when we think about it, these are one number R, but in real life, the cost to borrowers are different than the benefits to the lenders. There's taxation, there's banks making profit, there's ways that those actually diverge. As I said, my bank will loan me money for quite a different price than it will give it to me for parking in the bank. All right, then we have the interest payment. So sometimes we say interest just being the interest rate, and then sometimes we say interest being the interest payment, the chunk that you pay in excess of the principal in time period 1, right? So the interest payment is that little extra payment that we pay over the principal. And the interest rate we get by saying this payment divided by the principal will equal a rate. I will give you more money next year if you let me borrow this money this year. The additional amount that I will give you will be this extra payment. We'll divide that by the total amount, and that will be the interest rate. So it's like us defining interest rate in the two-period model. So we can go through a little bit of math. So if we're going to save $50 at a 5% interest rate, 5% interest rate used to be a normal interest rate. Now that's a high interest rate. We're in a strange period of time where interest rates drop down to 0, and they're basically inching barely off of 0 for savers. If we say a 5% interest rate, we mean 0.05. So we will get paid $50 plus $50 times the interest rate. This first $50 is called the principal. This payment here is called the interest payment. That's calculated as the principal, the $50 times the rate, 5%. That's the return on our investment. So another set of terms we'll talk about is future value and present value. So the future value is the amount that this principal will yield at a future time. And eventually we will put a subscript in there at time t. The future value in period 1, the future value in period 10, which in most of this class will be 10 years from now. So the future value is going to be the principal plus this interest payment. The future value in time period 1, after 1 year of saving at 5%, is going to be $50 plus $50 times 5%, which comes out to $250. Here, $250 is the interest payment, and the future value, I don't know what this thing is $52.50. If I hit this, the whole thing goes away. See? Damn it. Glitching. Okay, the present value. Now this is a calculation that we'll do a bunch, and this is sort of the basis of discounting. There's a couple different ways to think about present value, but we will start by saying that it's the amount that we would invest today to get a given future value at a given future time period, right? So present value will always be less than the future value. That's one way to think about it. The other way that we're going to think about present value is we know what a future value is, and we have to discount it back to what the smaller present value is. So the future value is going to be the present value plus this interest payment. And we can gather these terms to have 1 plus r times the present value. The future value is 1 plus r times the present value in one time period. If we put more time periods in there, we will keep collecting this term 1 plus r, right? So the future value in time period 1 is 1 plus r times the present value. This should be future value in time period 2 is 1 plus r times the future value in time period 1. Right? This is the same formula, just collecting it. So in future value in time period 2 would be 1 plus r times 1 plus r times the present value. So we'll collect these terms of 1 plus r, put them in an exponent here. So the future value in time period 2 is 1 plus r to the second power times the present value. So if we saved our $50 for 2 years at the 5% interest rate, we would have our 1 plus r to the second power times $50, and it was $52.50 the first year, and it's $55.13 at the end of the second year. So we can take this out to t time periods, with the exponent here being t, right? That was for 2 time periods. We put 2 in for t. We can take it out. This is called the compounding of interest. You guys all should have learned this already, but we're just kind of reviewing it here so we can multiply this into, we can put this into a few different formulas. So this is a spreadsheet, right? We have number of years out into the future. We just did 1 and 2. Our interest rate's going to stay at 5% throughout. And what I would say for the, and this will be on the next homework too, is we'll have this little term here, 1 plus r to the t. 1 plus r to the t is this term that we're multiplying by the present value. So it's like 1.05 in one period, and then we have this little exponent of the time that we're going into the future. And that multiplier is how much we're multiplying this present time period by. This is all for the present value of this last column of $50. So this is something they teach people in high school or investment 1, or like when you graduate from college, open your IRA and put money in it, because the longer you have money in your IRA, the more likely you're going to get this benefit of this huge multiplier out into the future, right? Graduate college, start saving money, because it's going to make a big difference if you have 30 or 40 years of money saved. A dollar that you save now is going to be worth a whole lot more than a dollar you save later. We're not going to talk about that so much. Here's an aside, that another part of people teaching this. There's a rule of 72. This is just sort of like a folksy way for people to think about things. It's a rule of thumb for people to learn what compounding interest is. And so the rule of 72 is how long does it take to double your money? So if you divide 72 by the interest rate, you will get the number of years to double your money. So in this, where was this number, this multiplier here too? It was somewhere between 10 and 20, right? So if we took 72 and divided by the 5% interest rate, it would take 14 years to double your money. So just a way to think about things in sort of like a simpler term than exponents. So discounting. Now this is a big thing that we would do as environmental economics consultants, for example. And if you want to have benefits for a project, costs for a project, it will be important to do really well discounting into the present time period all the different values for a project. So compound interest, is how much you're going to get in the future. With this little multiplier, the interest rate and time, times present value benefits. Discounting, if we want to make a good public policy decision, an environmental economics decision, a decision in Sacramento, we want to bring everything into the present term. How much is it going to cost us now, and how much of those future benefit streams going to be worth to us? We need all to be into the same time period to be able to compare. We can't compare payments we make now to build a power plant that's going to be online in 10 years to get electricity in 30 years. We need to compact that all into one time period. So the basic formula, the present value equals the future value divided by this little multiplier, 1 plus r to the t. So we're going to convert a future value into a present value by discounting it by this term with the interest in it. We're going to be able to rank different projects or evaluate different projects or make sort of economic decisions on different projects using what we call the net present value. So if the present value of the future benefits that we're going to get from the project is greater than the current costs for starting the project, then the investment is worth doing. And not only that, we can calculate net present value for a set of different policy options and rank them. Which project has the highest net present value? The present value of the benefits, usually we think about that in terms of the future, the cost of electricity in the future, or the value of recreation for this hiking area in the future, and the present value of the cost, build the plant, buy the wilderness, whatever it is right now. So there's an example in the book of planting of forests. How many forestry majors we got? A few? All right, the next few classes, there's a couple forestry things. So the example in the book, $1,000 to plant a forest, right? So that's present value, that's in year 1 terms. This is in t equals 1, this is now. But we're going to harvest it in 30 years when t equals 30. The future value in 30 years, right, this is our future value at t equals 30, will be $5,000. And we have some interest rate, we'll just say the back basis interest rate is 5%. So we're planting these trees, and we're going to harvest them later. And we want to see if it's worth doing this, because it's 30 years in the future. Will it be worth it for us? So we have a present value now, and we have this future value of the $5,000. Future value is $5,000. And we have this, we're going to divide it by this discounting rate, 1.05 to the 30th, which we can go back. So here it was 4.32 was the thing that we're going to divide it by now, 1 plus r to the 30th. So we'll divide it by 4.32, 1 plus r to the 30th, 1.05 to the 30th, and we will get the present value of the $5,000 in 30 years. This year, it's worth to us $1,157, right? That's how much $5,000 in 30 years is worth to us now, given this interest rate. So we have the net present value of the forestry project of $1,157, which is $5,000 discounted to now, minus the $1,000. What do I do? Here we go, it'll fade. Minus the $1,000 it costs to do this. These are all in t equals 0 money, so the net present value is $157. That's the amount that it would yield. There's a bunch of ways to think about this, and we'll just try and tie them together, think about them separately and tie them together later. One way we could be is if we didn't plant the forest, we could do something else to earn 5% interest. Like that's the safe bet. We could put it in the bank, say we could put it in the bank or mutual fund and get 5% interest. So will planting the forest beat our baseline investment? Will it beat the safe investment of 5%? And in this analysis, yeah, look, planting the forest beats 5%. It gets a better return than 5%. It's worth doing. We're going to evaluate the project. Is it worth it to society?